And welcome back to Talking Terrific Television. I'm your host, J.R. Rawls. With me as always is...
Jared Hornbeck.
How are you doing this fine, wonderful August evening, Jared?
I'm doing all right, man. All things considered, we are in the dog days of August right now. In New York City, we had a stretch of about 10 to 12 straight 90-plus degree days. So it's rough. It's been rough. I've been trying to get outside a little bit. I know I'm pretty limited with what I'm able to do, but trying to get outside, get a little sun, spend some time outside, maybe go for a walk, go for a run, something like that. So I've been trying to take advantage, but I can't spend that much time outside because it gets real hot real quick.
Same here in North Carolina. It gets super, super hot. I do running. It's my go-to stress reliever. I try to do it on my lunch breaks. And I so much prefer running in the cold, dreary rain than I do in this hot August, muggy, 100% humidity, 92-degree weather we've got going for us here.
It's like a lot easier, I think, in the wintertime. I found it to get up early and go running early in the morning. I would go, if I had to get up at 6 o'clock or 6:30 or something to get ready for work, there was a time when I was disciplined enough to get up at 5:30 to go for a run beforehand. And I agree with you. I prefer running in cooler weather. But, I mean, it is nice to get some exercise and get some sun as a byproduct of that exercise as well.
Yeah.
You know what helps, though, when it's really hot outside? Is a beverage. Are you drinking anything?
I am drinking. For the very first time in my life, I am drinking Can O Wine. Never in my entire life have I ever had a can of wine. I don't know why.
There's a few decent ones.
Bit of a wine snob, but not an extreme one. I don't mind twist-off caps, but I've never had a can of wine before. First sip. It's solid. It's a solid butternut Pinot Noir. I'm a sucker for a good Pinot. My personal belief is that Oregon makes the best Pinot Noirs in the entire planet. And
King Estate.
King
Estate is one of my favorites.
Good stuff. And this can is solid. It's a solid.
I was the listeners can't tell, but I was on the edge of my seat, waiting to see what your reaction to that first sip was going to be. So I'm glad that you liked it.
The taste is good. There is some psychological disconnect in me when I'm drinking from a can. Yeah, and I'm tasting wine. I'm not used to that.
Right.
It feels weird.
Yeah, we did that a few times. We grabbed canned wine to go to the beach, and it takes at least one before you get used to the fact, every sip, your brain trains yourself to think that you have beer coming into your mouth. And so you have to, you got to kind of, after one, I think you start to get used to it. Or if you bring, solo cups or something, you can pour it out.
And what are you drinking this fine evening?
I am drinking Coney Island Merman IPA. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Coney Island. Awesome brewery. My friend Amelia from high school is one of the managers actually there. So it's nice to go there and say hi and have some drinks. They expanded a few years ago and have killer outdoor seating. They're not open currently right now because they don't serve food.
Mm-hmm.
So with our phase 3, you have to order food at bars too. So they're not currently open right now.
I have not been to a single bar since the lockdown here. Just my own personal thing. Haven't gone to one. And I'm missing it. It's weird. I haven't been to a tiki bar. I did the math. I haven't been to a tiki bar in 5 years. But for some unknown reason, more than anything else, I want right now to go to a tiki bar. Any tiki bar, just get, a fruity drink with an umbrella in the middle and just be surrounded by tiki regalia. I don't know why. Probably because I can't, but I desperately want that right now.
I'd say that's probably why. I think maybe it's because it's the most outlandish of a bar, and you're sort of handcuffed right now from really going to any bar. So the one you want is the most bar of all bars. Man, yeah, I haven't been to. I can tell you, it's been probably 12, maybe 13 years since I've been to one. There used to be a bar. I don't. It's not the same owners anymore. But it used to be called the Hawaii Fountain, and we used to go there to get just like, those scorpion bowls and like dragon bowls, like the big drinks that people would share.
Yep.
Really strong, with the tiki stuff all around, parasols, all the whole 9 yards. I haven't been to one either. So now you're kind of putting that longing in my head right now too. But the Coney Island the Mermaid Pilsner is very good too. But what I was saying before is that it's cool that it's close. It's only probably about 4 miles from where I live. And it's just a solid brewery. And a lot of really good choices.
So our episode for today is The Sopranos, Season 2, Episode 6, The Happy Wanderer. Now, obviously, Tony directly says the title of the episode in this episode. You says the title, you wins the prize. But do you think it has any deeper meaning behind it, other than just that's something that he brings up in this episode?
I love the fact that this episode is called The Happy Wanderer, and I love the fact that we talk about this aspect of Tony's personality, because we've spent time in episodes to this point talking about how Tony gets off on violence, Tony likes to kill, he likes the thrill of the lifestyle, but a big personality trait of his is that he hates to see people happy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's recurring throughout the whole show, particularly with Janice. He can't handle it whenever Janice is happy.
Oh, I think you know the episode I'm talking about, when he sees that Janice is happy and just flips out at the dinner table. Oh, that's such a look into his soul. It's just perfect.
And we start exploring that here, which I really love. I love the fact that we're now going to focus on the fact that he enjoys people's, not just physically hurting or killing people, but he enjoys playing games with people, and he enjoys people's emotional suffering as well. And so the Happy Wanderer, as he mentions, as he calls that person, is just a person who can go through life and be happy with where they are in life. And Tony can't. I mean, he has money for all intents and purposes. He has a family. He has his health to some extent.
At least for now.
Right.
He steps on a scale in this episode, and he takes a look at it, and it's like, oh, well,
yeah, I guess like we have health in air quotes.
Yeah.
The fact that he's breathing. But you really do get, in the introduction of Davey Scatino in this episode, you really get a look at a slightly different character trait of Tony's, which is that he just really likes to make people unhappy. He doesn't like others being happy around him.
I'd agree with it. Now, this is an episode where we get a full-on, nothing withhold psychiatrist appointment for Tony, And it's actually been about 7 or 8 episodes since we last had that. And I don't think The Sopranos does that for the entire rest of the series. There is not as large of a drought of psychiatrist to patient interactions as we've had before this moment in time.
No, and I like how Tony is sort of already channeling his anger toward Melfi.
Mm-hmm. And I also like that we saw Melfi talking to her own psychiatrist about what she gets from these appointments with Tony's. It definitely removed the kind of Olympian level detachment you had in season 1, where she was more of a, I would call her, almost a Greek chorus for something Tony to interact off, more so than an actual character with personality. There were hints of it, but seeing her go with her psychiatrist and talking about how, she thinks it's very therapeutic for her to see Tony, and him saying, well, this is your therapy. You're not supposed to be getting therapy from your patients. And so I don't think we can ever see her interacting with Tony without having that in the back of our minds from now until the end of the series.
Yeah, I mean, it's a scene that happens and gives us a little window into the insight of what Melfi gets from seeing Tony as a patient, and we get to hear her dialogue with someone else. It's the only scene, the only scene outside of the scenes of Tony paying Vin Makazian to follow her, and then her having dinner at the Cusimano's house, where you really see her outside of the office.
But that was so brief. It didn't really feel like an in-depth examination of her the way seeing her pour out her heart and soul to her psychiatrist felt.
Exactly. It feels like they're just fleshing her out here.
Yeah. And let's listen to Tony talk to her about how he's feeling right now. 3, 2, 1, play. Why should Tony give a shit if a guy has a clear head? Why doesn't he say, insert Italian phrase here that I would mangle badly?
I'll salute.
There you go.
Because he's part Livia.
Yeah.
He's miserable.
And he needs others to be miserable with him. He can't wallow in his own crapulence.
Right. It's a... Was that a Mr. Burns quote there?
That was a Mr. Burns.
I was, with no one around, I was free to wallow in my own crapulence.
Yes. I was wondering if you were going to pick up on that. Yeah.
It took me a second, but yeah. And they say misery loves company for a reason. I mean, that's why he doesn't realize it, because he has blinders up still as to why he acts, a certain way. But I mean, we see it. The audience sees it. We see the characteristics that he has gotten from Livia, and that's one of them.
So Tony brings up Gary Cooper again. I should have a Gary Cooper counter for how many times he brings him up in the series, but our listeners can Google that themselves. But it's a lot, and it's always saying the strong silent type, and he was saying how he wasn't in touch with his feelings. He just did what he had to do. And Tony wants that ideal so much in this episode. He's really viewing himself as part of the culture of victimhood, as being emasculated by going to therapy, which he so obviously needs. And he's very much resentful of Melfi for helping him. He cannot accept the fact that people need help. And one thing that I did want to ask you, have you ever met people in your life who you consider to be happy wanderers, people who are just genuinely happier than you are, who seem to have a blissful life, let's call it?
Well, having grown up in New York, probably not. Everyone is a little bit neurotic here. No,
I've met a couple in my life.
I would have to think about it. There are probably people who, they come to mind, but then it's like, I'm thinking about my relationship with them, and I'm wondering if they seem that way because I didn't really know them well.
That's
and
what
they
I
kind
was
of put
say.
on a facade of like being cool with everything, being all right all the time.
because every one of those that I've known in my life, every happy wanderer that I've actually known, once I get to know them on a deeper level, it's not really true. There was this one girl in Japan who was the happiest person I ever knew, and I was just so jealous of her at the time. And I talked to her more, and eventually I learned, no, she's going through some serious problems. She has sad times. She has not great times, but she just goes about with a generally more pleasant facade than most people. But that doesn't mean she's living this blissful life 24/7 of no problems. And I learned that at the age of 23. And Tony is over 40 at this point, and he still has this unrealistic view of other people's happiness. That just because he sees someone is happy, that they are actually happy 24/7, which is not how human works. No one is happy 24/7, 365. It's just not how we operate.
Yeah, he uses the phrase a clear head, and I think we all have a clear head at some point for even a brief period of time, but that's usually fleeting. I mean, we usually are spending a lot of time thinking about, what our next move is, what we're going to do, what we need to prepare for, what we have coming up, and, maybe we have a good day where we're really productive and we have one task to do and we do it really well. So we leave and we're walking down the block and we're listening to music or we're whistling a tune. We have a smile on our face because for a few wonderful, blissful minutes, we have a clear head. I don't think there's anybody who really walks around like that all the time. I mean, not really anyone with a brain in their head. Like, I think you have some people who are... their social cues are putting out a facade of being very happy or very friendly or very rambunctious or whatever it might be. And maybe they just try so hard to put positive energy out there for others, but that's something that they're putting forward. Right. It's effort. They're not just walking around with a clear head hoping people will pick up on the contagiousness of their good vibes.
Yeah. And I think Tony actually really does think that, and until he realizes the extent of Davy's gambling addiction, I think he really does think Davy's life is just this blissful, wonderful awesomeness 24/7.
And then we learn that it is. And then the episode ends
with smiles and hugs all around.
This is a mean episode. I like it a lot, but it is just it's hard. It becomes harder and harder for me to watch as I get older because I start to look at myself as someone who, like, I do not at this moment, as of August 3rd, 2020, do not have a gambling problem, and I'm not going to gamble away my sporting good business or anything like that.
Which I want to get into in depth, but yes.
But I also feel that, he's about a 40-year-old man.
Yeah, same age as Tony, so he's in his 40s. Yeah,
who has a business and a family. And it's just, he lives kind of on the edge of this lifestyle, and just associating with Tony essentially ruins his life.
I'm going to run some numbers by you later on in this episode, but I'm not entirely sure that's the case. I think, given the numbers I'm going to run by you, I think his life was probably already ruined before he met Tony, and Tony pushed him over the edge. But we'll get to that later on. Tony does meet Junior at the doctor's office. And I'm not going to play the clip, but one of my favorite lines is where Tony is saying, Livia was always talking about my father's feeble-minded brother, and I always thought she was talking about you, Uncle June. That is that Sopranos humor, because he's not saying it to be funny. He's not saying it to be mean. He's genuinely always thought that was the case. But this is the episode where Tony learns he has a uncle he never knew about.
That's a great line. This is the funny episode, I think, and I think that'll come through in one or two of the clips. that we play later on
Yes.
that were chosen. This is one that definitely had. I said a minute ago this is a mean episode. I think it's mean in spirit because or it shows what the main character of our show is capable of. When I say mean, this is a funny episode. This one has a bunch of what I consider genuine laugh out loud moments. The first of which being the one you just said. One of my favorite lines.
Also, Tony's grandparents were mentioned. And he talked about in the past how his grandparents built a church. And that brought something to mind I never really thought about. Was Johnny Soprano the first soprano to be in the mafia? Because if Tony's grandparents were building the church, that doesn't really mean they were in the mafia. So his whole grand tradition may only be one generation older than him?
Yeah, or it could be that Johnny was, I'm sorry, Tony's grandparents had ties to the family, and Johnny got more involved than his parents had been. But yeah, no, it is interesting to think if it is only this one generation thing. That seems like a very swift change. Yeah. Like that doesn't seem very gradual if you're really only going back one generation.
Well, maybe we'll find out in the movie. I'm getting more excited for that. I know I say that all the time, but I really am. I wasn't excited for it like a year ago or 2 years ago, but now I'm really curious to see the prequel, because prequels have the perfect track record of never letting down diehard fans.
I was going to don't even. My God, this is another podcast entirely. I am not. I'm going to leave that alone. I'm going to pretend you didn't say anything.
All right.
Yeah.
Let me shoot a question at you.
Sure.
Did Junior tell Tony about his special needs uncle so that Tony would be distracted when Uncle Junior negotiated the percentage of the executive game that he was going to get?
That's really interesting. I never made that connection.
It's a little Machiavellian. I'm not sure Junior is that smart.
No, I don't think he is. If the if the roles were reversed,
I could see Tony doing that.
Yeah, I don't think. Maybe Junior is a little more feeble-minded. Hang on, pause for 1 second. I'll edit this out.
Sure.
It is like possibly hailing outside right now. Is my mic picking that up?
Lightly. I hear some background noise.
Thunder.
I heard thunder there. Yeah. Let's just go for it, man. We'll be fine. I'll see if I can run a filter, try to speak into your mic as much as possible.
Man, it's coming down. I just looked out the window, and all I see is the sheen of wet.
It started raining today during my run really heavily, but I actually like that because it's so hot that it felt actually good to just run in the rain.
Oh, during a run, it's great.
Yeah.
All right, let me just. I'm just gonna wait 1 second because it seems like.
And you're still recording though, right?
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
And back
there was
in.
Sorry, hold on. There was lightning. I just wanted to make sure the thunder wasn't coming right as we started.
Very, very frightening.
All right, I'm going to lower my microphone volume, and I'm going to stand it up closer to my mouth.
Sounds good.
All right, that should be okay.
All right, and back in 3, 2, 1. So after that doctor's office scene, we see them going over to the hotel, and I am wondering, is that the exact same bell that Paulie smacked over Ariel's head in episode 103?
I think it was. I looked. Actually, it's funny. I was watching it and I went, "Oh, look, there's the bell."
And this has one of my favorite Furio lines of all time. Is when the hotel owner is complaining, and Furio points out that he's getting blowjobs from the prostitutes, and then Furio says, "No bitch to me." There have been so many times at work when I wish I could say to my work colleagues, "No bitch to me."
That my friend and I would say that to each other all the time. Like if
it's perfect in so many instances of life.
It's my second most used Furio quote.
Oh, what's the first?
We'll get there in season 3, episode 7.
Ooh.
But whenever we talk about something that we don't like, we go, "Stupid the fucking game."
All right. Well, that's a preview, listeners. So stay tuned, and we will take a quick commercial break. But when we get back, Tony has some great fun with the newbies, so stay tuned.
You gonna grab a water or anything, or you gonna want to just go through?
I'm good. Just go through
cool.
If you're up for it. And coming back in 5. And welcome back to Talking Terrific Television. So we have Tony with Mike. But of course it's not Mike, it's Matt. It's Tony calls Matt Mike, which, oh man, that has got to hurt Matt because...
What a way to establish that these two guys are so low on the totem pole that they are in the ground.
Well, I mean, you think of how large Tony's business is. These people are honestly the equivalent of summer interns. They are, and a good manager should try to learn his employees' names. But if you mess up the name of a summer intern, no one's going to really care much except that summer intern. What do you think of the executive game? It's going to come up later on in the series, but it's an interesting look into the high stakes gambling world because this is a real thing. The Sopranos is usually pretty good at this, just having a really high stakes poker game run by the mob. That's a thing.
I guess. I always confuse this before I actually watch the episode with the game with David Lee Roth.
Yep.
That happens later on. But
which is also the executive game. It's all one executive game, but yeah.
Right, except this is the one with the chairboy of the board, as Paul he calls him, which is another great line. I really think you get some fun interactions with characters you don't see that much. You get Dr. Freed. You get Frank Sinatra Jr., who in his one appearance in the show here. And this is really, I mentioned earlier on a few episodes back that I forgot how little they gave Syl to do in the early episodes.
Yeah.
This is one of the first ones where we get some extended Syl.
Yes. We get some amazing scenes, and we'll play the clip in a second, but to set it up, Tony asked Matt to clean up around Sylvia, and this is totally 100% on purpose, knowing that Sylvia is going to get super pissed at Matt. Would you agree?
Oh yeah, it's. He sees the pile of cheese there. He gets the idea to send him over there because they drop a line slightly earlier about how superstitious he is, Silvio, while he plays. So they kind of say like, you don't want to bother him, and Tony gets this brilliant idea of how he's going to bother Syl during this hand, and what a great clip.
All right, let's play that clip right now. 3, 2, 1. I mean, I'm not being entirely disingenuous when I call that Steven Van Zandt's greatest acting performance of all time. It works on so many levels.
It's one of the first times that he's feels natural. It takes him a little while because he's not an actor by trade. It takes him. I think that in season 1 he gives a few glances. He gets a few lines here and there, but they're not really good. I feel like it took them a season to feel comfortable to really give him any, because if you pay attention to the interactions between Sil and particularly Paulie, Tony Sirico is an actor. Mm-hmm. And so usually there'll be 3 or 4 Paulie lines for every Silvio line. Right. Less with Big Pussy because Vincent Pastore was not an actor. So those two, I mean, Pussy's character obviously is more important in season 1 than to the plot of season 1 than Sil's character. But I think this is really the first time they're getting to where they realize, like, no, he's turning this into a character. Mm-hmm. And the character now has his own quirks and his own traits the way that Paulie Walnuts does. And the way that, the way that Big Pussy does too. I think he's not quite as defined as Paulie is, but I think now you're getting to see Sil as not just kind of a one-note guy.
Right. Also, very important to the scene is Davey showing up and really pushing Tony to the best of his ability to be allowed in the executive game. He's obviously jonesing for it. He says to Tony, "Do you know how many jock straps I sold this week?" And now I think that can be interpreted 2 ways. One, it could mean that his business is doing great, so he doesn't have to worry about losing the money. But it can also be how bored he is out of selling jock straps. Like, just, I have sold so many jock straps, let me have some fun. And do you think Tony was genuinely trying to discourage Davey from joining this gambling thing, or was it all an act?
Oh, I think it was all an act, because I think he knew he would get in over his head and not be able to get himself out and be indebted to him. I think that's an aspect of Tony's character that's really important. Is that he's very predatory.
Well, I would say he feels the most hostility towards degenerate fucking gamblers. There's a definite pattern here from his dad cutting off Satriali's pinky to Tony hitting the HMO gambler in his car to Tony's contempt for the detective who he squeezes for information until he commits suicide, and now Davey, who he's treating as his bread and butter. I think Tony has a deep hatred for gamblers.
Yeah, and there's something else too that I noticed about Davey's personality, and there's a great line that I think can be viewed as a throwaway line when we're first introduced to Davey Scatino and with Artie at the school, which is, Tony says of the two of them, They used to be like Joe Namath and Y.A. Tittle, and now
Yes.
they're uh, Phil Donahue and Alan Alda. And going back to what you were saying before about Gary Cooper and the strong silent type, I think what Tony's saying here with that quote is that, when you think, obviously, first he's talking about football players
Right.
for the New York Jets in the late 60s and early 70s. But then when he says Phil Donahue and Alan Alda, these are really interesting choices because Alan Alda went from being, a leading man in television to being sort of an activist,
Hmm.
particularly with women's rights, feminism, stuff like that. And Phil Donahue was basically just a male version of Oprah or Sally Jesse Raphael.
Right.
And so I think he was in his brain picking two sort of effeminate men.
Hmm.
And I think that comes back to, I think he just thinks that like Davy is weak. I think he's pointing out a weakness in his character. So even though Davy is, maybe he's referring to him as the happy wanderer, he's also kind of referring to him as the opposite of the Gary Cooper. He's the opposite
Right.
of the strong silent type. And I think that that's a kind of person that Tony has this resentment for.
Right.
Someone who is, because it's self-loathing. He is upset with himself for seeing a psychiatrist, so he goes out of his way to badmouth people who are in touch with their feelings or people who show emotions.
Right. Also in this scene, Richie shows up. Davy owes him money, and Richie basically threatens to kill Christopher in front of everyone at the game. Now, at this point in time, Christopher is not a made man, so it's not quite the huge deal it would be if Christopher was a made man and he was threatening him. But it's close, and Tony should be really deeply concerned about the disrespect that Richie shows towards Tony, his crew, the game, everything. Richie is once again just losing every ally and friend he could possibly have with his actions. He is not being smart.
I agree with that, but I also find him to be kind of scary in this scene. For a guy who's like 5'2", he's actually pretty imposing.
Oh, he's got that short guy syndrome of like, I have to be tougher than everyone else because I'm so short. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not tall by any
Right.
stretch of the imagination. I mean, I'm 5'9", but I just feel like, yeah, he you're right. It's that short guy. So I don't walk around that way because I don't feel threatened by people's height per se. But yeah, he has that energy. But I actually find, like, for a small guy, like, I think it kind of works on him. Like, I find him to be pretty imposing. And I don't get this when I watch that scene. I don't think, oh, Richie's coming in here, he's gonna act tough. I kind of see him come in and think, like, without having seen the whole series, if I was seeing it for the first time, actually think like, oh wow, yeah, like he might actually kill Davy here.
Yeah. If you hadn't seen the whole series yet, you could think that. So what's your thoughts on gambling? Have you ever gambled? Do you ever go to Vegas? Do you ever play poker with your friends? Does it have much of a draw or allure for you?
I get it. I don't do it very much, especially not really any time over the last 10 years or so. But I get it. I understand the appeal.
It really feels video gamey to me, and I can understand why some people get addicted to it. I had the worst gambling experience you can ever have. The first time I ever gambled, it was on the high seas on a ship, so we could gamble even though I was underage in international waters.
Were you gambling on Mortal Kombat?
No. Was gambling in a rinky-dink casino, which, looking back, was really kind of pathetic on some cruise line ship. And I had the worst possible experience in that I won and won big. And won big for like a 14, 15-year-old, you know. And at that point, I was like, gambling's awesome. I should do this all the time. And then I lost. And I hate to lose more than I like to win. So gambling just never really struck that check mark for me. Like, I could never see myself falling down that rabbit hole, because I can get the same amount of pleasure chemicals from my brain playing a video game as I can by gambling. And it's a lot cheaper to play a video game than it is to gamble.
Yeah, I used to go, it's only a few hours from here to Mohegan Sun, and it's only a few hours from here to Atlantic City. Mm-hmm. And so I used to go to both reasonably frequently. I had a couple friends. We would go to Mohegan Sun quite often, and not doing anything crazy. It would maybe bring a couple $100 and play with that for as long as I could play with it. And if I ended up playing with the house, my own money, I would call it a night. Mm-hmm. Atlantic City too. So my extended family used to get a house on the Jersey Shore every summer, and we would be about 20 minutes from Atlantic City. So we would go to the beach, and we would go have dinner in one of the casinos. And then my cousin was more of an avid gambler, and my uncle too, than I was. And so they sometimes would have free rooms and stuff because they would go more often. And we would go to the casinos for a couple of nights. And same thing, I would bring a few $100s, nothing I would feel bad losing, and I would try to not really walk out in the red. I will say it is infuriating to be up and up and up and then get greedy and lose everything.
Yeah. Yep.
Because I had a few I like playing roulette and I like playing blackjack. And I had a few times where I bet pretty smartly and was, on a cheap bet, like a $20 bet or something. Actually, a $20 bet table was up, up to even maybe like up a couple grand.
Right.
And then should have been like, cool, now's the time to cash out.
Yeah.
And didn't, and then ended up back at $200 again. And I was like, well, you know what? I guess as Lemmy and Motorhead said, the pleasure is to play.
So after he has lost money, he says to Tony, "How did your daughter make out at Bowdoin?" And Tony is furious. He comes down on him heavy because Tony is so wanting to keep his family separate. Capital F family and lowercase family do not touch in Tony's mind. And if you have incurred a debt on the capital F family side, don't even mention that lowercase family, because Tony will want to crush you utterly.
Well, it's like when Pussy comes back in episode 1 of the season, and Tony says to him, like, you can't sell one feeling to me. It's kind of the same thing here. Like, you don't get to small talk,
right,
Tony, in this situation.
Right.
And he lets him know that right away.
Wow.
But again, how angry is he really? Because, again, this is his plan.
Right.
He is going to extort this person
for everything he has, which, let's talk about that.
$40 is a ziti.
$45.
Oh, $45, sorry.
$45,000. And running through the figures through usinflationcalculator.com, the $45,000 in 2000 money is $67,000 in today money. Okay, so I want you to keep that number, today's money, in mind. So he owes essentially $67,000 in today's money. And I want to get into the figures on why I don't think it was solely Tony that ruined this guy's life. I Googled around. Now, the average sporting goods store, which Davey owns, or his wife owns and he runs, the average sporting goods store makes very little in the first 1 to 3 years. They don't really make much money. But by year 3, they should be making $350,000 in profits, and by year 5, $500,000 in profits. Now, you can get into a lot of details here on, are they leasing a place? What's their salary and stuff? What's their expenses? All that things. But if he has a successful sporting goods store, he should be making $500,000 a year in profit. And $67,000 is a lot of money. I don't want to downgrade it. But if you own a successful, or your wife owns, you run a successful sporting goods store, $67,000 should not crush you unless you've already incurred a lot of previous debts and have messed up your life enough that it can. But in and of itself, that debt should not destroy you.
No, but let's see. Do you think that Tony, at this point, has the long con for the bust out in mind?
Yes, 100%. Tony has that long con in mind. But I'm saying that Davey shouldn't have to go down that route unless he's already in debt to other people who we may not see.
Right. So I guess what I was trying to say before was not that all of his debts are because of Tony, but I think Tony has a grasp on what the other debts are.
Yeah.
So I think Tony probably has an understanding of, like, this guy's going to get into us for some serious money. He already owes X amount of money to someone else.
Yeah, that could very well be the case. But I do think, given the figures involved, that he should not have his life ruined over $67,000 unless he had already made a series of big mistakes before this point in time. Just based on the average income of a sporting goods store.
Interesting. I never thought about that aspect of it. To me, it always just seemed like a lot of money. Like, it seemed like maybe the store was doing all right, but not great, and that he has a now college age kid and a house in New Jersey, which is...
but the house he has, he should be able to pull out a equity line of credit on that house for $67,000 without serious difficulty, given how nice it is, unless he was already heavily in debt, heavily mortgaged his house to the maximum he can. And I just got to think, given the numbers involved, there's other factors, because while $67,000 is objectively a lot of money, if you are upper middle class, which he is presented as being, it shouldn't present an insurmountable obstacle for someone who is upper middle class in their early 40s, which he is presented as being.
Maybe I'm making this up, and I will find out in a few weeks when I can, continue watching episodes as we go along. But I think there's a line when he tries to go to complain to Tony about it. I think he has a line where he says that he's going to lose his house.
Yeah.
So I led to believe then that, he probably has done this and, maxed out lines of credit and debt with lots of other people. And, being someone who blindly signed my life away for student loans and didn't fully understand what they meant, that interest is a killer.
Yeah.
So the VIG is the killer on that one.
Right. Well, soon after that scene, Meadow takes a phone message on how Tony's brother-in-law's father died, and Tony asked her if she asked any questions, and she didn't. She didn't really do anything but just take down the message he died. And this was such a perfect encapsulation of young kids being incredibly selfish and self-centered and just really not really thinking things do. Okay, a person died. I got the message. Let me go back to my Walkman or whatever it was in the year 2000. After that, we see Barb. Once again, I always love seeing Barb because it's a reminder that you could escape the Soprano lifestyle if you really wanted to, but none of the people really want to. Off the top of your head, how many funerals in The Sopranos can you name?
The lady who gave Uncle Junior his first-hand job behind the chicken market.
But just let's not
wait to this point or in the show in general.
In the show in general. Just give me a number. How many do you think there are?
A decent amount. I would say 12.
Yeah, I think it's up there. It's up there. And I particularly also loved Livia making a huge scene of mourning at this funeral. What are the odds that Barb's father-in-law actually liked Livia? I mean, given her personality, I mean, the most likely thing is he could not stand the woman. And yet here she is carrying on for, someone she probably saw like 2-3 times. Something ridiculously small like that.
Yeah, they don't talk much about the relationship between Barb and the rest of the family, other than that they don't see them a whole lot, because in episode 1, when Janice comes back and they have the barbecue and they're talking about the house, you just get the sense from Barb that she is just like, you do what you got to do, let Tony handle certain things. She was not trying to get involved. I mean, you see that since Tony is so much more actively involved in taking care of Livia, that Livia has a closer relationship with AJ and Meadow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Livia has a closer relationship with AJ and Meadow. I don't know that she sees Barb and Tom's kids ever.
No.
And nor would she have interest in being a grandmother to anyone who's not conveniently located.
No, I don't think so. Also, is giving money at a funeral a thing? I'd never really seen that before.
Never heard of it. Not to any that I've been to.
Also, a perfect instance of the Soprano humor is where Tony pulls Richie aside, and Richie says, "I don't think you can smoke here," and Tony asks the dead guy if he minds, and the dead guy apparently doesn't mind. Again, people never talk about what a funny show The Sopranos is, but it's got so many great things.
And the idea of smoking in a funeral home is so funny to me too. I mean, obviously, yes, the stiff doesn't mind, but just the idea that you're like, oh, I need to do this right now. Like, right. I can't go outside and smoke. I'm going to smoke a cigar, too, which is like a very aggressive way to smoke.
Well, it was the pre-smoking ban world. It was where smokers just got so much leeway. It was like, oh, you're at work and you need to leave every hour to take your break to smoke. Okay, you can do that. Meanwhile, no one else gets to do that. No one else gets this 5-minute every hour decompression break, but back in the day, the smokers got that. They got so much leeway.
Yeah, I was never a smoker, but I had a lot of friends that were. And I remember I was working in a restaurant previous to when they banned cigarette smoke. And I remember, would go into work, and if I had to work in the smoking section, now I always found that because smokers tended to sit a little bit longer, they also tended to be a little bit more generous I remember getting that I would get tipped well when I worked in the smoking section. I feel like they would be more encouraged to order more stuff because they're going to have another cigarette. They're going to stay a few minutes longer. And I would go to diners and stuff with my friends, and I had friends that smoked, so we would sit in the smoking section, even though I personally didn't smoke. And it's such a different world, man. I forget sometimes that I existed in that time. Like you watch. I know it's heightened and it's exaggerated when you watch, Mad Men or something, and they're smoking, 12 cigarettes in every scene. But it was really true that, like, you could. I mean, most people who smoked could just sit at a booth, with a glass divider between them and someone else who was not in the smoking section.
Well, I mean,
and,
keep in mind,
and light up a
smokers
cigarette.
say how many packs they smoke per day. Okay, how many cigarettes are in a pack? Okay, there's 20 cigarettes in a pack, and there's 24 hours in a day. So, if you smoke 2 packs a day, then you're smoking, multiple times per each hour that you're awake,
Yeah, it's crazy. That's like chain smoking. Well, it's really not, because there are plenty of people who are maybe not as many anymore, but I used to know people who definitely fell into that category of multiple pack a day smokers. But I laugh now because I was watching something on Netflix, and when the parent guide thing came up, it said depictions of nicotine.
Yep.
Or depictions of
now,
smoking.
Up
and
there
I said,
with sex.
wow. What a, not to get too okay boomer on everyone here, but like, I just couldn't believe it. I said, they have to preface the fact that there's smoking in this. And I mean, it's one of those things, I just, through no fault of my own or no fault of their own, do not have the same perspective of someone born in 2005.
Right.
So I don't know. Those people have sort of grown up in the culture of where smoking was this thing people did, sort of akin to drug use.
Right. Yeah. So different world. On the drive back, Janice is really pushing Richie and talking about how she shouldn't take anything from Tony. Richie says that Tony gave her $50,000, and Janice says that her father gave someone $50,000, but that was 30 years ago, which is worth $500,000. Now, remember when I said $45,000 20 years ago is $65,000 today? Well, the inflation doesn't quite work that way when you compare 1970 to the year 2000. Because younger listeners, the whip inflation now was actually a presidential campaign back in the 1970s, because inflation was way larger than any rates you are used to, because $50,000 in 1970 is $221,000 in the year 2000. So Janice is exaggerating. But if she's not lying, and I don't think she is, then, Tony did give almost 25% of what his father gave to someone in a similar situation when his father was in charge of that. So, honestly, it does sound like Richie got a little stiffed if that's the package he got for, serving years and decade plus of his life in prison.
Yeah, Janice is exaggerating, but she's not wrong in her point. And this is an interesting moment in the season. This is where it really sort of pushes us full blown into, okay, expect a Tony and Richie conflict. Expect
they are definitely
this
setting
to
that up.
be. Yeah, I think here is where it officially becomes like, okay, so Richie is going to be Tony's main conflict here, and I think the show does a really smart thing to not fall into that trap again, and to have to mislead the audience into thinking that because now they'll start to set these things in motion where something that will happen to Christopher 2 episodes from now will put Richie in a precarious situation. Then a jacket will come into play and put Tony in a precarious situation. And they really do sort of set you up like, okay, we're in season 2. Tony's, monster of the season, or main foil of the season is Richie Aprile. And I think the show does a really smart thing this season by, in the last 2 episodes, by really subverting your expectations.
Yeah, as it often does. So David ends up asking Artie for money, and ooh boy, 2 questions on this. Is Artie lying about having to put a new roof on his restaurant?
Yeah, I think it's just like, I think the restaurant, any sort of restaurant construction or modifications is the default go-to, because who's going to challenge him on it?
Right.
It's like the old adage of like, if you want to call in sick from work, like say you have diarrhea, because no one's going to call you on it. It's like, that's what it is. If you say you got to put a new roof on the restaurant, you have a restaurant. Restaurants require work and maintenance. No one in their right mind is going to be like, oh, I want to see proof of that.
Right.
It's just, it's that it's in the well. It's just the go-to. He probably, if someone were to ask him the next day, he would come up with something different. That would be about restaurant maintenance.
Right. And second question, does Artie learn anything from David's experience later on? Does he think back to what David is going through right now, or is it all just out one ear and not really residing in his brain?
I think it's both, because I think he understands the risks, but I think Tony and Artie's relationship is closer than Artie and Davies or Tony and Davies.
Way closer.
Yeah,
way closer.
And I do think there are other opportunities that are going to arise from Artie to accept offers from Tony for things, and so I kind of get it. Like, I think he understands the risks, and I think he understands that it's best to not be involved. But I understand the allure of knowing that you have this potential resource, because we've been apartment hunting because we were trying to get out of our lease early. It doesn't look like that's going to happen, but we don't have the money to pay out our lease. If someone I knew was involved in some shady stuff and came to me and said, you want me to float you the money to pay out your lease?
Right.
I would really have to think about that hard.
Right.
Even though I would know the risks, it's like you recognize that the resource is there. So does he learn from Davey? I think a little bit, probably, but he also, I don't know. Artie is an interesting character who is going to need support in different ways, and he's not above going to Tony for it.
Yeah. I think you're right on that front.
I can't wait till we get to the episode with the Armagnac.
Oh, it's going to be great.
I remember watching that episode with my current girlfriend, and she was covering her face because she was so embarrassed for Artie in that episode. I mean, he is just he is a loser, but he's an endearing loser.
So after that, Davey goes home and comes up with a BS reason to confiscate his son's car. And the other parent is seeing her husband do something stupid, but she has this excellently acted scene of, I know the other parent is doing this stupid thing, but they're still the parent, so I don't like this conflict. I don't like having to see you do something stupid, but also having to maybe support you or talk to you later about it. Oh God, this sucks so much.
Yeah, and it sucks as that kid too, because it's like he didn't do anything.
Mm.
It's just,
Well, yeah.
I mean, he is clearly a good student. He's involved in a lot of extracurriculars. He's concerned about college. He obviously is a good kid. There's no indication that he is a bad kid or acts out in any way, except for the fact that he clearly has taken his Jeep off-roading once before.
Which, whatever. But so again, another point. So this SUV, it's getting $20,000 for it. So off of his $45,000, so he should only have like $25,000 left. Again, if you're upper middle class, you should not lose everything over $25,000 unless you've already messed things up so very, very badly.
Yeah, and I think we agree now that he has.
Yeah. So Tony comes home and presents Meadow with his car, and let's hear what Meadow has to say over that. Let's hear what Meadow has to say about that. 3, 2, 1. That is some fabulous acting there. That is just a really, really great scene. Meadow is being portrayed as a teenager, but she's still a teenager who has enough self-knowledge to know this is messed up, but it is also true that my lifestyle is supported by things like this, and I hate that.
Yeah, it's interesting that when she says he sold it to you and he says something like that,
Yeah.
I always wondered why it was that he didn't just say, I mean, obviously Meadow would find the truth out once the two interacted with each other again. But I feel like in that moment, it'd be very easy to say like, I was looking for a car. He was selling, oh, he sold it to you. Yeah. But there's something in the fact that Tony almost wants to
He
like rub her nose.
He 100% wants her and Carm to have to face the fact of where their money comes from. He does not want to carry this sin all by himself. He wants them to share in his sin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's really interesting because I remember thinking like, why he could just say yes, and then like Meadow would maybe eventually find out, but then it would be her dad's word against Eric Scatino or and his father. But yeah, you're right. He wants them to suffer, to be part of this, to suffer along with him, to be very much aware of how the money is made. It's a really interesting choice and a really, really wonderful scene.
Yep. After that, we see Richie and Janet and Livia all showing up for Meadow's recital. And gosh, that's a really large crowd for your kid's recital, honestly. I mean, Tony and Carm are not good parents. I want to make that clear. But they put in some work. They don't just completely ditch their kids. They at least do go to these, spoiler alert for people who don't have kids, intensely boring events. When you go because it's your kid and you want to support them, but no one is there who does not have some familial bond to the people performing. Okay, it's not generally something that people like to do outside the bonds of family obligation, and they're there at the end of the day. I mean, that's a good crowd to show up for.
They're there. Tony's kind of sitting there looking around like Homer, like unfinished. Good. This shouldn't take long. But so they're kind of just they're there, but they are putting in the work. You're right about that. And then I love how they make the announcement that the duet is canceled, and Tony and Carmela goes, "Oh, I wonder what happened."
Yeah. Well, it's on a deeper level. It's also showing that Meadow is getting yet more advantages from having a mob boss leader as her father. She is getting the solo that will help her college application thing. Although part of me is just like, are they really going to check that you had a solo or not? Do you really think the colleges are going to be calling and saying, did this person have a solo? I need to know. Was it a solo?
That's such a good little nuanced detail, though, about how she ends up. It looks like Eric is the one who loses out because he quits.
Oh, and he lost a car, and he loses his college. But then
in the wake of that, she gets a solo, which is, again, better than what she had. Yep. So, yeah, that's a nice touch.
All right. So Song of the Week is going to the Happy Wanderer, because of course it is. First appearances in this episode is Vito, who we didn't bring up, but this is actually the first appearance of Vito Spatafore, who is not only Richie April's nephew, but also on his crew. Also, the first appearance of David Scatino, the compulsive gambler, as well as Dr. Ira Freed, who we've already mentioned treats erectile dysfunctions and also performs illegal surgery for mob-related injuries. So that'll be interesting. Deceased in this episode is Tom Giglione Sr., Tony's brother-in-law's father, who died after falling from a roof a few days after retirement. So, ouch. That would really... I mean, there's no good time to die, but that feels like super sucky. I tell you, for the first 5 years after I retire, I'm not getting on a single ladder. No ladders 5 years after.
It's really bad. It's not ironic, but it could totally be an Alanis Morissette lyric.
Yes, exactly.
to fall off a roof a day after retirement.
Cultural references. Junior says Hercule was strong like a bull and handsome like George Raft. George Raft was an American film actor who was in many gangster melodramas from the 1930s and 40s. During Silvio's wonderful rant, he says, this fucking moron's playing Hazel. Hazel was a hit 1960s TV show starring Shirley Booth as a maid. Had you ever heard of Hazel?
Mm-hmm. I hadn't. Not like, I don't think I've actually ever seen a second of it, but it's one of those things where I feel like somewhere in my life the show was referenced.
Right.
So I knew of
probably Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Probably, but I knew not just contextually from the fact that he was sweeping that Hazel was a maid.
Right.
Never saw it. I mean, I know Yeah, I know the actress's name is Shirley Booth, and I know it was a show from the early 60s that was in black and white. Unlike a bunch of other contemporaries of that show that were on, Nick at Night or TV Land, don't think I've actually ever seen it. I only know of it in reference.
Right. So when Meadow is going to perform a solo number, it is My Heart Will Go On from the 1997 film Titanic, which was only 3 years old at the time of this episode. So, that's like not that old of a film at this point.
No, I mean, that song was probably still on the charts.
It was definitely still on the radio. So, and of course, Tony mentions Gary Cooper. Have you ever seen a Gary Cooper film?
Sure, Pride of the Yankees.
I've never seen it.
Yeah, I mean, Pride of the Yankees comes to mind first, only because I think that's to Gary Cooper is kind of synonymous. But he's also in High Noon.
No, haven't seen High Noon. I thought I might, but I was thinking of a different Western.
High Noon is definitely worth checking out.
Quickly looking at his most famous things, it is possible I've never seen a Gary Cooper film, although I'm honestly an old movie fan, so I'm kind of surprised by that. I will do a further examination the next time Gary Cooper appears on the show, which will probably be in about a season or two. So, final thoughts?
Great episode. A lot of really funny lines, easy to pull clips, a lot of turbulence, moving, hitting halfway in the season. Now, I know we talked briefly about how we felt that the next episode is a bit misplaced.
Yes.
Sequentially in the season. I agree with that. I think in a perfect world, this and the next episode would be flip-flopped.
Yeah, I see no reason that couldn't be done.
But I like this episode a lot. Great Silvio moment. Good. I like the executive game stuff is a lot of fun. They really go hard with making Dave Scatino just a complete degenerate.
Right.
I mean, yeah, we didn't mention also who's playing Dave Scatino, and it's Robert Patrick, who has sort of made a career outside of Terminator 2 and the X-Files of playing sort of fringe characters. He has like a weird energy, and I think is the right guy to play Davey because he has sort of that normal all-American look, but there's something slightly off about him, and he portrays this New Jersey suburban upper middle class family man and father with some pretty dark secrets really well.
Yeah. All right. Next week we have D-Girl, where Christopher meets Mr. Marvel himself, Johnny Favreau. So stay tuned. And cut. All right. Stopping recording.